They live is partially a political statement, it's partially a tract on the world that we live in today. And as a matter of fact, right now, it's even more true than it was then. We are manipulated by a lot of media around us. We are consumed by consumerism. And as you can see in the recent events in this country, they are still among us. They do live.
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
The truth hurts because the truth is all there is. The truth hurts because the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, because the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, because the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth. You can't hide.
Welcome to the show that explores the social dynamics and psychological forces that shape our world, much like the pecking order in a chicken coop. Why is society structured in rigid hierarchies? Why do we instinctively follow authority? And how is our belief in this structure manipulated to control us? We'll explore the layers of social conditioning, the psychology behind obedience, the hidden mind control techniques that influence our lives, and the universal moral laws that stand in stark contrast to manufactured authority. This is the Coop Files, and welcome back. This is episode 3. What is freedom? Before we get into the episode, let's just do the usual housekeeping. Today is Thursday, the 24th of April. It's been more than a couple of weeks since the last episode, but been busy and pulling together these presentations is quite a lot of effort. So please bear with me. I'm going to try and release an episode every 2 weeks, but my idea here is that each episode it's a series, and each episode should be watched in order. So it doesn't really matter when the episodes are released. If you're new to this, please start at episode 1. Otherwise, there might be some things that I'm saying in later episodes that you either don't understand or don't agree with because you haven't heard the reasoning behind it. Who is this show for? The usual sort of housekeeping, the usual introduction that I feel a need to go through. This show is for me. It's not for anybody else. This is something that I feel strongly that I have to do because I feel like I'm in a world surrounded by people who are just completely ignorant and quite frankly don't care what's going on around them. Who's it not for? The statists, the people who believe unwaveringly in the state, the conformists, people who just go along to get along, who have no individuality, the authoritarians, those who hate freedom, who want more rules, the atheist left-brainers, people who don't believe that there's anything other than the material world, the closed-minded, people who are completely offended to anything that goes against their belief system, and they don't want to even consider anything else. Crying little babies, the emotionally and spiritually immature, again, and the thin-skinned, again, crying little babies, easily offended, can't handle their emotions. If a piece of information doesn't feel nice to them, I don't like the sound of that, then they reject it. Emotionally immature. Those opposed to the truth, who enjoy their comfort, people who just want to come home, open a beer, watch Netflix, watch the football, couldn't give monkeys about what's going on around them. Again, see the patterns here. The self-loathing, people who just completely hate themselves. They've got no self-respect, don't care about anything. They haven't even got any questions to ask. Couple of clarifications from the last episode, a couple of things that were playing on my mind, but also just this one particular subject that I wanted to briefly return to. Compromised cult members. Covered this in the last episode. This is how they're controlled. We saw a video of Tim Fortescue explaining the role of the senior whip in keeping MPs under control, or party members. Let's just quickly remind ourselves.
Anyone with any sense who was in trouble would come to the whips and tell them the truth. They'd say, "No, I'm in a jam. Can you help?" It might be debt. It might be scandal involving small boys, or any kind of scandal which a member seemed likely to be mixed up in. They'd come and ask if we could help, and if we could, we did, and we would do everything we.
So there you go. Small boys. We would do anything we could to get them out of trouble, and then we'd store brownie points. That's how the cult operates. And the reason I brought this back up was the day after I put this presentation together, I think it was actually in the news the day I was putting the presentation together, but I came across it the day after. And that was this absolute piece of trash, Dan Norris. Allegedly, he's been arrested he has been arrested on suspicion of rape and child sex offences. So these offences are alleged. This absolute piece of trash. I mean, he's a piece of trash anyway because he's an MP. He already lives he's delusional that he has a right to control other people's lives. And obviously you can see people with that mindset, you can see what they think of other people as well, of children, the property. He was the mayor of the West of England since 2021, an MP for North East Somerset and Hanham last year. He was taken into custody after police raided his constituency home on Friday. So this was a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So you can imagine my, not surprise, but my amazement at the timing of this. Talk about synchronicities. If you think it's a stretch that so many of these cult members are completely compromised and that this is what they do behind closed doors, then it was just like, it just fell into my lap, didn't it? Make that claim, and then, hey presto, one comes out of the woodwork. He was previously in Parliament from 1997 to 2010, representing the seat Wansdyke. He served as a junior minister under Gordon Brown, and he was assistant whip under Blair. He also previously trained and worked with the NSPCC and worked as a child protection officer and teacher. This sicko, alleged sicko, but this is what they do. They work with and around vulnerable children with the prey, just like Savile, just like all of the others. That's what they do. And I've never heard this name before, Dan Norris. I mean, who cares? They're all the same anyway. But after just reading a few articles about him, this absolute piece of trash was doing a promotional campaign. I can't remember which part of the country it was, in 2021, somewhere in the west of England, and in support of him on his campaign. This was before the Labour Party got elected. In support of him on his campaign in 2021 was no other than Keir Starmer, who was on that campaign trail with him. And, you know, Keir Starmer, the man who was heading up the Crown Prosecution Service at the time when Jimmy Savile wasn't prosecuted. Just another coincidence. So, and then it clicked into place. What else happened? Something happened when Starmer was on that, in support of him during that campaign. And it was the incident in the pub during the nonsense when a pub landlord refused to let Stalin into his pub because, as a Labour voter, the landlord thought that Stalin wasn't representing the opposition as the opposition should be. He wasn't holding the government to account, and he's absolutely right. So this is funny. It's funny, and it's also quite sickening. Anyway, let's have a look.
That man is not allowed in my pub. No, Laura. I'm not going to physically hurt him. That man. Oi! That's assault. I am not bothering you. I am not bothering him. That man is not allowed in my pub. Get out of my pub. Go on. Get out of my pub. Thank you.
Bring David Cameron back,
Guys, you are having that party, please.
Yeah, come on in here, Mum.
They've been on the front line keeping people alive. So I really don't need lectures from you about this pandemic.
You've got one.
Can we come in? Is that okay?
So there you have it. That was during Dan Norris's campaign trail. Stalin there, trying to get into somebody's pub, who quite rightly chucked him out. And I mean, do you see the absolute contempt that he has for this member of the public, the landlord? I'm not going to be what was the word? I'm not going to be lectured by you. This is the absolute contempt that they have for us. But people still go and vote. They still do what they say. They still believe in the cult. They still believe in the cult leaders. I just thought it was worth Worth just pointing out that this is one of Keir Starlin's colleagues, and obviously, you know, what type of relationship would they had? I don't know. You know, maybe they've been exchanging stories, whatever those stories might be. Anyway, let's move on. I just wanted to very, very quickly cover this as well. I don't want this to be a news channel, but I just wanted to cover it because this has really annoyed me, frustrated me. This is in relation to the Netflix television series Adolescence, which is doing the rounds at the minute in the UK, and people are talking about it, but they're talking about it in Parliament. In Parliament, Keir Starlin, called it a documentary. It's a made up drama. I mean, they might be trying to highlight some issues in the real world, but it's still a drama. It's still fictional. And Starlin is standing in Parliament calling it a documentary. The challenges raised by adolescents aren't something we can simply legislate for. If I could pull a lever to solve it, I would. It's only by listening and learning from the experiences of young people and charities that we can tackle this. That's what I've been doing today. The charity he's been listening to and discussing this with is Tender, which is a nationwide charity harnessing the power of drama and the arts to educate children, young people and adults about healthy relationships, working with a wide variety of organisations, from primary schools to global businesses. We promote respect and equality and prevent domestic abuse and sexual violence. All very well. I mean, does anybody disagree with that? So Tender is, they are part of the production of this Netflix drama. They've certainly got the arm of or the role of promoting it, and it's their job to organize for this particular fictional drama to be shown in primary schools. That's the role that the Tender are playing as part of the production team of Adolescence, and it's fictional. And you can see there that over the last 5 years, government have provided grants for Tender of, what's that? That's 13, 17, 18, 22, £2.2 million. £2.2 million of your money has gone to this charity. I mean, did you consent that the money that was stolen from you without your consent would go to this charity? I didn't. I'm not a charity. This is what, just very briefly, this is what the series is about. It's about a young boy, you can see him there in the bottom right corner, 13-year-old, and he ends up stabbing a schoolgirl, to death because she made fun of him online, something like that, because he's an incel. I mean, this is total propaganda. 13-year-old boys, generally speaking, who come from, and this is the other thing, who come from a two-parent, solid nuclear family. 13-year-old boys who come from that background, sort of lower middle class, parents have got good jobs, everything is perfectly what you would expect in a normal functioning family. They don't become murderers. There is no statistic to back that up. So it's propaganda. It's trying to convince the public that knife crime by young people in this country is committed by that stereotype, and that's just complete horseshit. The other interesting thing is the use of Andrew Tate in this. I keep wanting to call it a documentary because Stalin called it a documentary. In this fictional drama, they use Andrew Tate's name as one of the root causes for these white 13-year-old boys from steady families killing young girls on the street. It's Andrew Tate's fault. I mean, I'm no fan of Andrew Tate at all. There's not one bit of me has any liking for Andrew Tate, but I'm pretty sure as a result of Andrew Tate and what he says isn't having an impact on this particular demographic. According to the makers of the series, it's meant to be loosely based on the general rise in knife related incidents in this country by young people, and I've just put up there some of the more high profile ones. So yeah, you can see that the stereotype in the adolescent fictional drama is pretty close. My point being, this is propaganda, partly funded with your money, being called a documentary, which is going to shape policy and legislation, which is just going to come back and take away more of your rights and more of your free speech. And I want to touch on this, which I mentioned at the end of the last episode, the 4 tenets of the cult. And I called it the atheist's selfish death cult, which it is. And every member's obsessed with death. Every member's obsessed with dying, petrified of dying. I just wanted to point out that because I said atheists doesn't mean that I'm religious. Yeah, you can put the religious people into this cult just as much as you can the atheists, because they are at heart atheists. Most of them are hypocrites, and most of them are petrified of dying, and most of them live by these tenets. They don't live by any religious tenets. They live by these ones. The proof is in the pudding, so to speak. By their fruits you will know them. They live by these tenets. So just wanted to point that out. I don't follow any religion just because I'm not an atheist. What is freedom? That's the topic and the question of this episode. Freedom. Power of self-determination, state of free will, emancipation from slavery, deliverance, exemption from arbitrary or despotic control, civil liberty, possession of particular privileges, arbitrary control, free from that, exemption from arbitrary control. It has been said by some physicians that life is a forced state, i.e., you have no choice. You don't choose to come here. The same may be said of freedom. It requires efforts. It presupposes mental and moral qualities of a high order to be generally diffused in the society where it exists. When I came across that quote, I just thought that statement, that quote, pretty much tells you everything you need to know. Life is a forced state. and the same may be said of freedom. You need to put effort in, and you need to have mental and moral qualities of a higher order. You need to think with your rational mind. You need to have morals. You need to understand objective right and wrong. And that needs to be generally diffused in the society where it exists. So everybody, or the majority, the vast majority of people, need to have these qualities for freedom to exist. In other words, what he's saying is freedom is your reward for morality, which is natural law. The more morality there is, the more freedoms you have. John C. Calhoun, U.S. House of Representatives, January 31st, 1816. Ironically, I think this man was a slave owner at the time, which is ironic. But this was during the period of Enlightenment, where people were looking at the philosophy of things like natural law. And they did eventually abolish slavery. So we got there in the end, or they got there in the end. Freedom is the natural state or conditions for humans. So natural, non-man-made state. At the beginning of time, when humans first arrived, whatever your belief in how that happened, when humans first arrived into this world, before anybody came up with the idea of government, what state was there? There was just freedom. That is the natural state. Once somebody comes up with the moronic idea of government, of a control system, then you are instantly no longer free. It's not a sliding scale. There's no grey areas. Some things are black and white. Black and white is black and white. Freedom, slavery, black and white. So the Age of Enlightenment. The Age of Enlightenment was an intellectual and philosophical movement taking place in Europe from the late 17th century to the early 19th century. The Enlightenment, which valued knowledge gained through rationalism and empiricism, was concerned with a range of social ideas and political ideals such as natural law, liberty and progress, toleration and fraternity, constitutional government, and the formal separation of church and state. The Enlightenment was preceded by and overlapped the scientific revolution, which included the work of Johannes Kepler, Galileo Galilei, Francis Bacon, Pierre Gassendi, Christian Huygens, and Isaac Newton. I hope I've pronounced them correctly, among others, as well as the rationalist philosophy of Descartes, Hobbes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and John Locke. The dating of the period of the beginning of the Enlightenment can be attributed to the publication of René Descartes' Discourse on the Method in 1637, with his method of systematically disbelieving everything unless there was a well-founded reason for accepting it, and featuring his famous dictum, "I think, therefore I am." Others cite the publication of Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica as the culmination of the scientific revolution and the beginning of the Enlightenment. So the scientific revolution and the beginning of the Enlightenment, but unfortunately the idea of constitutional government as well. They didn't get everything right. But even the scientific revolution hasn't gotten us very far, has it? Philosophers and scientists of the period widely circulated their ideas through meetings at scientific academies, Masonic lodges, literary salons, coffee houses, and in printed books, journals, and pamphlets. The ideas of the Enlightenment undermined the authority of the monarchy and religious officials and paved the way for the political revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries. A variety of 19th century movements, including liberalism, socialism, and neoclassicism, trace their intellectual heritage to the Enlightenment. So they undermined the authority of the monarchy and religious officials. So it was a period of enlightenment, rightly called as such, because it undermined the authority of the monarchy and the religious dogma, the religious officials. But unfortunately, it paved the way for the new political revolution. So this is where the kind of politics that you have in place now was generated from socialism. We live in a socialist society here in the UK. Everything's on a scale of socialism, which at the right you have fascism, and at the left you have communism, and somewhere in the middle is socialism. The whole thing is socialism. And obviously paved the way for the new scientific revolution. So this is the new world order. This is where you can trace the roots of the new world order back to. The old world was the monarchy and religion, and the new world order is government and science, or scientism, as it really is today. The new world order is government and scientism, and that is what has led us to the path of the 4 tenets of the cult. Those 4 tenets are based in the belief in authority as your government, as in the government, and a belief in scientism. No, there is no God, there is no spiritual component to our existence. Everything is relative. This is where relativity came from. Everything is relative, including morals. And if there's no God, man is God. There is nothing higher. There is no higher intelligence. Man is God. That's what leads to eugenics. The Enlightenment was marked by an increasing awareness of the relationship between the mind and the everyday media, of the world, and by an emphasis on the scientific method and reductionism, along with increased questioning of religious dogma. So this is where ultimately, obviously, the scientific method and reductionism where is it getting us? It's getting us into scientism, into the institutional science, and the narrow-minded belief that all that works, all that matters is the physical. The central doctrines of the Enlightenment were individual liberty, representative government. I think we can see who they represent. The rule of law, man's law, and religious freedom, in contrast to an absolute monarchy or single-party state and the religious persecution of faiths other than those formally established and often controlled outright by the state. It sounds like a slight improvement. You can imagine why people thought the New World Order was a good idea. So we've touched on natural law and morality. So let's just look at that in a little bit more detail. Natural law is a philosophical and legal theory that posits the existence of a set of inherent laws derived from nature and universal moral principles, which are discoverable through reason. Reason is the capacity of consciously applying logic by drawing valid conclusions from new or existing information with the aim of seeking the truth. It is associated with such characteristically human activities as philosophy, religion, science, language, mathematics, and art, and is normally considered to be a distinguishing ability possessed by humans. Reason is sometimes referred to as rationality. So natural law and morality is rational. You can come to a rational conclusion. Reasoning involves using more or less rational processes of thinking and cognition to extrapolate from one's existing knowledge to generate new knowledge, and involves the use of one's intellect. The field of logic studies the ways in which humans can use formal reasoning to produce logical, valid arguments and true conclusions. So using rational processes of thinking, you can extrapolate from knowledge you already have, your basic understanding of morality and right and wrong, and you can extrapolate that to generate new knowledge. Philosophy. Natural law holds that there are objective legal standards based on morality that underlie and inform the creation, interpretation, and application of human-made laws. This contrasts with positive law, as in legal positivism, which emphasizes that laws are rules created by human authorities and are not necessarily connected to moral principles. That is 100% true. Rules created by authorities, by man, are not necessarily connected to moral principles. That is 100% true. We can't just make up the rules as we go along. They have to be underpinned and informed by reason and common sense, logic. What is morality? Again, natural law is a philosophy and legal theory that posits the existence of a set of inherent laws derived from nature, i.e., they've always been here, and universal moral principles, i.e., they apply to everybody, which are discoverable through reason. Repeat here. Sorry about that. Freedom is the right to choose between right and wrong. Freedom or slavery. Let's cover objective morality in a later episode. But yeah, freedom is the right to choose between right and wrong. Going back to the natural state, when you don't have a government controlling you using violence and coercion, then you will happily choose your own, make your own decisions, make your own choices, and you deal with the consequences. And all you're doing is choosing the difference between right and wrong in every decision you make. Sometimes it'll be, is this the right decision for me? But sometimes, well, all of the time, it will be backed up by, is it wrong for anybody else? Am I causing anybody else any harm in making that decision? If the answer to that is yes, are you causing anybody else harm? Then it doesn't matter if it's the right decision for you. You do not have the right to make that decision. Well, you can make the decision, but you'll suffer the consequences. So the right to choose between right and wrong, or the difference between freedom and slavery. If you can't make your own choices, you're not free. A slave, a person who is the chattel or property of another, originally Slav, used in this secondary sense because of the many Slavs sold into slavery by conquering peoples. So the word slavery actually comes from Slavs, or the people who spoke the Slavic languages. The oldest written history of the Slavs can be shortly summarized. Myriads of slave hunts and the enthrallment of entire peoples. The Slav was the most prized of human goods, with increased strength outside his marshy land of origin, hardened to the utmost against all privation, industrious, content with little, good-humoured, and cheerful. He filled the slave markets of Europe, Asia, and Africa. So the Slavs were very industrious, content with little, good-humoured, and cheerful. That just reminds me of most people today. Happy in conditions that they shouldn't be happy in. Enslaved persons were taken from the Slavs and Iranians from antiquity to the 19th century, from the sub-Saharan Africans from the 1st century to the mid-20th century. Sorry, I don't think I've explained that very well. Enslaved persons were taken from the Slavs and Iranians from antiquity to the 19th century, and from the sub-Saharan Africans from the 1st century to the mid-20th century. So the sub-Saharan Africans, that period of slavery lasted longer, up to the mid-20th century, but the Slavs and the Iranians were enslaved from antiquity to the 19th century. So the Slavs and the Iranians were slaves for much longer, and they were the first group of people to be enslaved. And the picture there in the background is what we would typically be taught at school as a typical picture of slaves and their masters. And obviously they don't look like Slavs and Iranians, but that is the picture we're sold. There's a picture of some Slavs. They certainly look very industrious and strong-willed, happy with little. This map is the, let me just put that on full screen. This map is the regions where the Slavs came from, everywhere from Poland, Czechoslovakia, Slovakians, Slovenians, Croatians, Bosnians, Serbians, Ukrainians, Russians, Latvians. That's not what I was taught at school, where slavery started. Oh, whilst researching Slavic people, I came across a Slavic mail order bride from goldenbride.net. So maybe even in the 21st century, maybe some Slavic slaves do still exist. It's meant to be a joke. Okay, let's have a music break. Okay, so the Slavic word for slave comes from uh, the root of the word comes from orbu, Old Slavic orbu. The ground sense of which seems to be thing that changes allegiance. In the case of the slave, from self to master. So think about it. You're changing your allegiance. Your allegiance should be to yourself, but it doesn't. It becomes your allegiance goes to a master, somebody who owns you. And where in today's society, where is so many people's allegiance? We saw that during the 2020 PSYOP. Their allegiance was to the masters, to the rules. They weren't governing themselves. The Slavic word is also the source of robot. I didn't know that. Robot. Mechanical person. Also person whose work or activities are entirely mechanical. From the Czech word robotnik, forced worker, forced labor, compulsory service, drudgery, to work or drudge, servitude, slave, servitude. So it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You know, a robot has an owner for whom it works for, 100% owned, and it changes allegiance to different owners, just as a slave does. Once it gives up its allegiance from itself to its master, the slave then just changes allegiance, whenever it's sold on. So you can, and they are just robotic. And I just found this almost just interesting, peculiar, and humorous. And the amount of people I refer to as robots, because they are robotic in their actions, but they also are robotic in their thoughts. They don't seem to have any higher intelligence. They can't rationalize things. They can't extrapolate knowledge. Well, most of them don't have any knowledge, but they can't reason either. They are robotic in the thinking that everything that you shouldn't be is a human. We've covered obviously rational thinking, logic, extrapolation, expanding on knowledge. They can't do any of those things. They're very robotic, very binary in the thinking. So it's just laughable that they come across as slave-like. They are good little workers at work. They don't want to think for themselves. They just want to be told what to do. This is the vast majority of people. These are the conformists, the people who want to go along and get along, the people who will just keep their head down, do their job, be happy with little, and not cause any waves. I mean, they're bitchy as hell behind your back. They're bitchy as hell when it's safe to do so, because they are petrified of standing out, because they're not individuals. They don't like speaking up in public. They're just, these are the ash conformists, robots. Just do what the next person says. They don't like speaking out in front in public and looking different. They don't like having an opinion which is different to anybody else's, because they are so lacking in self-esteem and so self-loathing that they just go along to get along. This is that is the robot class. They are the perfect slaves. They are the compliant workforce. And they're exactly like that in society, because they have They have changed allegiance from self to master. Nobody with any allegiance to themselves behaves like that. Orphan comes from the same word as well. Orphan, bereft of father, deprived of free status. To change allegiance, to pass from one status to another, again comes from the Slavic languages. Servitude, slave. So when you think about an orphan, they are just passed from pillar to post. They will just obviously give their allegiance to whoever it is that's looking after their needs, just like a slave. So you can see the connections here. Cattle. That was a word which came up as I was just pulling these slides together when I was researching where the words come from, and that just got me attention. In general use, a personal possession. All of their chattels had been stolen, all of your personal possessions. In law, an item of property other than freehold land, including tangible goods. In context, both were considered chattels, personal before the law, and thus were judged taxable property. So your personal property is tangible goods which can be taxed, which are classed as property. Are you taxed? Does the government see you as their property? Taxable property. It's funny how these words just come up with these little nuggets of truth. Cattle. Sounds like cattle. Taxation as slavery is the idea that taxation results in an unfree society in which individuals are forced to work to enrich the government and the recipients of largesse rather than for their own benefit. Taxation as slavery. George Mason University professor Thomas Rusty uses two hypothetical anecdotes to illustrate his point of view. In the first, Sam Slime mugs a person for £50. In the second, Sam Slime votes for a politician who taxes a person in order to redistribute £50 to the disadvantaged Slime. So both examples involve the use of force. However, the second scenario is arguably worse, since through the state, Slime is now empowered to repeatedly take others' money, thus putting them in a condition of slavery. And nobody can, well, I was going to say nobody can argue with that. People will try and argue and defend the taxation system, but on an objectively true level, looking at it through an objectively true lens, you can't argue with that. So this person mugs somebody for £50, then you would put that person in a cage. You would take away that person's freedom. In the second situation, a politician comes in and writes on a piece of paper that you must give £50 to the system, and the system is ultimately going to give that money to this mugger. So the mugger is getting your money. The mugger is getting your money. It's just made legal through politicians writing on a piece of paper. Both involve the use of force, threat of violence. However, the second scenario is arguably worse, since through the state, the mugger is now empowered to repeatedly get your money, and that is a condition of slavery. You're working, and you're having the fruits of your labor stolen. That's slavery. And that is, we mentioned socialism during the period of enlightenment, and that is the socialist system. You go to work, but I'm going to mug and rob you, and I'm going to give some of your money to a piece of trash who doesn't want to contribute to bettering their own life. That's socialism. It's theft, violence, and coercion, and completely immoral. Historically, the earliest and most widespread form of taxation was the corvée, which can be traced back to the beginning of civilization. The corvée was state-imposed forced labour on peasants too poor to pay other forms of taxation. Labour in ancient Egypt is a synonym for taxes. Wow. State-imposed forced labour on peasants too poor to pay any other forms of taxation. Does that sound like the vast majority of people? The vast majority of people haven't got any other forms of taxation. They don't own big houses, yachts, private jets, or any other chattel that can be taxed. They only have themselves as chattel. You are forced to go to work in the system, and you are forced to pay taxes. Corvée is a form of unpaid forced labour that is intermittent in nature, lasting for limited periods of time, typically only a certain number of days work each year. So it's intermittent, and it only lasts for limited periods of time, and it's only a certain number of days work each year. So it's a form of unpaid forced labour. So let's think about this. You go to work for, well, there's 365 days in the year, but you only go to work, I'm taking just a typical scenario, 5 days a week, which is, let's just say, for the purpose of a quick calculation, let's just say 20 days a month times 12 is 20 times 12 is 240. So you go to work 240 days. I know you might get paid holidays, but that doesn't matter. That's still classed as a work day. You just get paid for not going. So 240 days a year you go to work. How many of those days are corvée? So if you pay, just for simplicity, 20% tax, 20% of 240 is 48. 48 days of forced unpaid labour that is intermittent. They only last for a limited period of time, and there's only a certain number of days that you have to do that each year. 48. That's corvée. That's unpaid forced labour. You don't have any choice to not go to work on those days, the days that you're not paid for. That's forced labour by that definition. Or is there a grey area? Or is this black and white? While slavery was a part of life in ancient Egypt, the Mediterranean, Rome, and Greece, many slaves received wages. For example, in some of the first records of taxation and slavery from over 5,000 years, we see evidence that Egyptian pharaohs only collected 20% tax on grain harvest, and yet the subjects were considered slaves at this high level of taxation, as is recorded in the book of Genesis. 20% tax and they're still considered slaves. 20% tax and they were still considered slaves. How much taxation is slavery? 1%? 20%? 100%? 100%. So if you believe that 100% taxation or 100% of your fruits being stolen is slavery, then when are you free? At what point are you free? Because as we've seen, a slave is somebody that is owned, where there's somebody's got a claim to ownership over you that you've given your allegiance to, and that owner can decide how much taxation, how much they're going to steal from you, the fruits of your labor. So how much of your fruits are stolen is irrelevant. You're a slave. You're either free or you're a slave. You're either your allegiance is to yourself, and nobody else bothers you, and nobody else has ownership over you, or you're a slave. If somebody has ownership over you and can steal you without you being able to do anything, and they steal from you using threats of, they force you to hand over your fruits using threats of violence and coercion. How much taxation is slavery? Anything. If stealing 100% of the product of someone else's labor is slavery, at what percentage is not slavery? That is the question. So answer in the comments. What percentage is not slavery? Statists then and now. 1861, it's my right to force other people to work in my fields. 2012, this must have been drawn up in 2012. It's my right to force other people to pay for what I want. That just absolutely goes along with that example I made before. That's the government official robbing you and saying that I have a right to force you to pay for what I want. That's what the government is saying to you. And all it takes is it's written down on a piece of paper, and then you've got some immoral fat man dressed up as a Roman god with a hammer who will order you to be put in prison. And then along come the order followers and they'll put you in prison. And that's the immoral, absolute satanic system that we live in. It's completely inverted and it's complete slavery. And anybody who tries to justify paying tax, we need the roads maintained. We need services to be provided, public services. Yeah, we do need public services. And yeah, it's nice to have roads that actually function. Is that a justification for slavery? Get your story straight before you start spouting your nonsense. Is that a justification for slavery? And this garbage comes out of people's mouths because they can't think, they can't rationalize, and ultimately kind of quite like their servitude, especially if they're high up the pecking order in the coup. They don't want equality. They don't want freedom for all, because the slave system has benefited them. If they're high up the pecking order in the coup, they're like a house slave. They're happy that they have got more privileges than the rest of the slaves. They get to go in the house. They get to sit and have a meal with the master, or maybe have a meal in a different room. They get to keep warm. They get a better bed at night. They get all of the privileges of the house slave. Why would that house slave want to free the other slaves? Because he's finished. He's out there in the big bad wide world on his own. The house slave doesn't want freedom. And that's why people, well, that's one of the reasons why people try and justify slavery. I'd let the roads go to rack and ruin. Who cares? we'll eventually fix them using morality and doing the right thing and actually helping each other out and creating an environment and a culture and a society where people do things because it's the right thing to do, not because they're slaves and not because they're forced to. Radical. If taxation without consent is not robbery, then any band of robbers have only to declare themselves a government, and all their robberies are legalized. Again, can't argue. It's absolutely pathetic when you actually stop to think about how simple this is to get your head round. How it's just pure common sense. But people are so mind controlled to believe in the system, because they are so mind controlled that if there wasn't a government, if there wasn't order followers to use violence and coercion and robbery, they think that things would turn into chaos. And we've just described chaos, but they think it's the other way around. No, there is order and control at the minute. Is there? And they are so fearful of not having owners that they can't even imagine what it would be like to not have an owner and actually take responsibility and actually know the difference between right and wrong and actually build a society that can thrive. They're petrified little children. True anarchy. So we've looked at the word freedom, or the meaning of freedom, and we've looked at the word slavery. So let's look at anarchy. From Greek, lack of a leader. The state of people without a government. This goes back in Athens, used of the year of 30 tyrants, 404 BC, when there was no archon, abstract noun from anarchos, rulerless, from a without, from an, which is without, and archos or archon, leader, without leaders, without rule or rulerless, without a ruler. A leader, there's nothing wrong with having a leader. That's all a parent should be, ultimately. Somebody who leads their child in the right direction, using morality and common sense and all of the other things we've spoken about. You don't rule over your children. Up to a certain age, you obviously need to make sure they're physically safe. But they're not your property. You're their leader. So without leader, it is prefer to say ruler or master, because a leader in today's language has a slightly different meaning. So it's really without masters, without rulers, people who have ownership of you. The Greek archon, ruler, commander, chief, captain. Yeah, that says there, to rule, lead the way, govern, rule over, be leader of. So again, it's mainly the ruler and the master that is the true lack of or without. Master, what is a master? A man having control or authority. So no authority over. Nobody has authority over you. In the broadest sense, one who has power to control, use, or dispose of something at will. Control, govern, use, go to work, or dispose of. It's an interesting addition to that broader sense, isn't it? You can certainly see a lot of disposals happening at the minute. One who employs another or others in his service. So you go to work, you've got a master. Most people work for a master, a servant, a man, or apprentice, owner of a living creature, dog, a horse, a slave. So a master is somebody who has a dog. I have a dog. I'm its master. I'm his master. A horse has a master. What do you do with a horse when it's wild? What do you do with a horse because it's so used to freedom? You break it, don't you? You break the horse, you break it in, you break its will. That's what you do to a wild, free animal. It's like you do to a human. If they don't comply, put them in a cage or a slave. Only slaves and animals have masters. Archon, master. Rulers have subjects, rulers make rules, and masters have slaves. Anarchy is the condition of no masters, no rulers, no slaves, in other words, freedom. So going back to the natural state, before we had man-made rules and man-made governments, the natural condition was freedom or anarchy. Anarchy does not mean chaos. That's a mind control technique where words are manipulated and their use, the meaning and the use is changed. So people have a certain reaction when they hear certain words, but that's what anarchy means. It made me think of Aldous Huxley, a key figure from decades ago who was an author and part of the upper class, I would say, a eugenicist, and he had links to the Jesuits, so he must have had some clout, and he's been a big figure in popular culture. So let's see what he had to say. There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies so that people will, in fact, have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing and enhanced by pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution. And that just sums up today's society. Happy in situations they ought not to be, happy in their servitude, happy in their slavery, happy in the pecking order. As long as they see people beneath them, they're happy. As long as they can go home, open a beer, and watch men playing children's games on the television, they're happy. Any problem, any health problem, take some pills. Any mental illness, any deviation from what you would call normal mental health. I've got some sort of disorder, I need some drugs. What do these drugs do to people? Does that make them, incapable of rebelling? Does it remove their will? Does it make them have no or very limited motivation or ability to think or rationalize or have common sense, have morality? Completely apathetic, loving their servitude. Stop the euphemisms. Call it what it is. It's slavery. Any other phrase is mind control. The system must convince you that it is something other than slavery. It must convince you that. Because I don't know anybody who, if you just went up to them and said, "Do you want to be a slave?" the answer would be yes. I don't know anybody who would say that. I can't imagine anybody would. So nobody wants slavery. So that's why the system must convince you that it is something else. A claim to have the right to control you, take your resources without consent, and to threaten you with violence if you don't obey is nothing other than a claim of ownership. Stop trying to legalize slavery. It always has been, is now, and always will be immoral. Stop the euphemisms. I thought I would just cover some ways that people are divided mentally in their own minds because they haven't got a balanced worldview, and they certainly haven't got a balanced view of how society should work, how nature should work in terms of the human condition. This goes into the left and right brain function, which is not an exact science, but generally speaking, the two hemispheres of the brain in the main function in relation to these elements. The left is analytic thought, logic, language, science, and math. Right brain is holistic thought, intuition, creativity, art, and music. So you can see straight away the right brain function, holistic thought, and intuition, creativity. They're all the sort of things which are going to give you the ability to think like a normal human being, as in rationalize and extrapolate, use common sense, use reason. Obviously, you still need analytical thought and logic. We covered that, so you can see how both parts of the brain are required to be able to function and to rationalize and to make sense of some of the things that we've covered. If you've got, and the male side is the more dominating side, and the female right side is the more sort of passive and creative and nurturing. Left side is more controlling, dominating. So the idea that your behaviors are determined. This is the idea that your behaviors that you exhibit could be determined by having a brain function which is imbalanced towards one side or the other. And this creates also a worldview imbalance as well. So if you are more towards the left brain, if that's the part of the brain that you use the most, then most of your functions and your behaviors and your worldview will be firing from that side of the brain. And that creates randomness. The idea that we live in a random world. The universe is a grand accident, a cosmic fart, in other words, the Big Bang theory nonsense, randomness. There is no underlying intelligence in nature. You have to, if you are ultra, left-brained skeptic, then there is no intelligence above man. There is no intelligence in nature. It's all random and luck. So you believe in luck. Everything that happens is just luck. If it's good, it's good luck. If it's bad luck. Natural law does not exist, i.e., there is no law governing the mental or the spiritual element to life. There is no spiritual element. There is certainly no spiritual law or moral law. What morals? What? They were made by nature. What are you talking about? That's how these people think. Natural law doesn't exist. As in, there's nothing to govern us. They accept that there are physical laws that govern us, they govern our physical abilities, and they dish out consequences if you ignore them. They believe all of that, but they don't believe that there could possibly be any behavioral laws that govern your behavior in the mental realm, i.e., what is right and what is wrong behavior. They don't believe that. Existence is purposeless. The only reason you're here is to earn money as much as possible and consume as much as possible, to get up the pecking order as much as possible, and to be able to look back at your life and look at your estate, your riches, your success, and that materialistic, selfish outlook on life. Your success and who you are as a person is measured by the size of your wallet or by the size of your bank balance. How many people do you know like that? Is that you? Probably not, because you would have switched off long ago if it was. This is, these types of people, they are social Darwinists. Come on to that in a second. Hallmarks of atheism and scientism. Again, that's their worldview. They believe religiously in the scientific institutions, and only the material world matters. And they definitely are atheists. Of course they are. Everything's random. There is nothing out there, nothing above us. It's pure arrogance, and money is everything. I know so many people like that. People have just completely just give up on. It's almost impossible to be around. The left brainers. And then the people who are got a balance more to the right side of the brain, and that creates their behaviors and their worldview. Determinism. God controls every event in creation. They might not believe in God per se, but everything that happens to them it's not It's not just random and a coincidence and either good or bad luck. It's the opposite. It's that this is just how I'm meant to be. This is my lot in life. There's nothing I can do about it. It's almost like you know, I'm forgetting the phrase. Somebody who thinks that they can't change anything, who they've got no sense of self-importance at all. They just think they're just destined for bad things. I can't think of the word. It'll come back to us. All occurrences are preordained. That's like fate. This is my fate. It's. I've just got to. Again, these are my cards. I'm just gonna accept them. Victim mentality. That was the word I was looking for. Victim mentality. That's what this sort of imbalance creates. Somebody with victim mentality. Free will does not exist. There's nothing I can do about it. Nothing I can do about it. I've just got to put up with this. Change is impossible and action is meaningless. Again, they give up hope. There's nothing I can do about it. I'll just, I'll just meditate and everything will be okay. That'll make us feel better. Hallmarks of religious extremism. That's where that can lead if it's coming from a belief in religion. But I'm just talking about on your average person becomes a victim with that sort of worldview, and they certainly become fodder for the government. This schism of the mind, the master and the slave. So you can see how that divide creates the mentality of a master and a slave. The atheist, the scientism, the moral relativism, social Darwinism, eugenics, totalitarianism. This mindset is the mindset of the psychopath. Not to say that everybody who has a worldview of randomness is a psychopath, but certainly that's where the extreme psychopathic tendencies they fit into all of those. High in intellect, but no actual morals and compassion and empathy, things that would come from a balanced person who, their brain is functioning properly. Media, money, and malnutrition are the mind control elements to that. And cognitive dissonance, deliberately ignoring reality to have those worldviews. Deliberately ignoring reality when it comes to morality. For example, social Darwinism, eugenics. How can you think that is the real world? You're just ignoring it because of your beliefs and the mind control that you're under. There is objective morality. It's quite easy to define the difference between right and wrong if you actually take some time to think about it and your brain's functioning properly. Social Darwinism, the idea that people with certain genes are just, they're fit to rule. Everybody else is just a slave. It's those with the genes. It's those with the right genes who should survive in the higher echelons of the chicken coop. That's what social Darwinism is. And on a lower scale, on a lower level, social Darwinism is people who they only socialize with people who they see are just above the pecking order. And that's who they socialize with in terms of money and material wealth and material ownership. People who socialize with others who are just on the same pecking, maybe slightly higher, and they're using them to get access to higher resources and higher social circles. And they want to climb the ladder. They're desperate to climb the ladder, and they don't want anything to do from a social perspective. They don't want anything to do with the plebs at the bottom, people who have less money and less resources, who might have morals, and they might actually, be very, very, have really nice personalities and be fun to be with, have morals, be bringing their children up in a proper way, in a moral way, and have all of the qualities of a good human being, but they haven't got any resources, so they don't fit my social agenda. I want to climb the pecking order. So that's my version of social Darwinism within society, within just social hierarchies. You can see them a mile off. And as soon as I spot one, as soon as I think I'm in the company of a social Darwinist, my version, I have to disconnect all or cut all ties. They are just generally speaking, in general society, people who I have to rub shoulders with if I do go out to socialize. They are the people that I just want to repel them. It's like I can sense them a mile off. They ooze master mentality, arrogant. Anyway, I've spoke about the the left brainers for long enough. So the right brain people, they might be religious in their thinking. They might think they're unworthy. Again, victim mentality, self-loathing. Obviously, you go into a state of self-loathing if you have had experiences in your life which give you a sense of unworthiness. Eventually, that'll turn to self-loathing. It might turn to addiction. Again, these are the types of symptoms which you associate with somebody with like depression or with some sort of disorder, personality disorder. It's not, in my opinion, it's not necessarily a disorder. It's just you're not fully thinking. You're not firing on all cylinders. You're not. Nobody's worthless. Nobody deserves self-loathing. Well, some people do, but not your typical right brainer. Order follower. These are people who it doesn't matter what order they were given, they would just follow it because they're a willing slave. These are the types of people who would probably be happy in a relationship with a master type character. Probably in an abusive relationship, they would probably just be willing to that. I mean, you see these people all the time. They think they're not worthy, and they're so self-loathing that even when they see their partner is abusive, they think they deserve it somehow. They make excuses. So you can see how this all works. And the master can still be an order follower, because he recognizes that there's a master above him, and he doesn't want to lose his place on the pecking order, so he will follow orders as well. And fear is the currency of control, of the mind control. So we're going to touch on mind control and how you're kept in a state of slavery, and tactics which are used to keep you in that state of slavery, because it's only in your mind. Remember that they can't call you a slave. They can't let you know that that's what you actually are. They need you to believe that you're free, and they need to use a tactic to control you, and that is fear. One of the aspects, or one of the tools in the toolkit of control is scarcity. Scarcity keeps you in a state of anxiety. Have you ever felt like there's never enough time, money, or energy to get anything done? Scarcity of time. That feeling is being stretched. That feeling of being stretched too thin is more than just stress, it's scarcity. Research in behavioral economics and psychology shows that when we experience scarcity, our cognitive bandwidth shrinks, making it harder to plan ahead, make sound decisions, and see the bigger picture. See the bigger picture and make sound decisions. That, with all the stresses in life, work, childcare, organizing this, dealing with family members, dealing with dramas, dealing with your children having to go to all these different groups, and it's pure scarcity. You are completely stretched, and work as well. Both parents have to go to work, and it affects your thinking, planning ahead, and making sound decisions, seeing the bigger picture. You wouldn't even be able to see this because you're so locked into getting things done and just survival instincts. When people are preoccupied with immediate shortfalls, whether financial, temporal, or psychological, their ability to think long-term suffers. The poor make riskier financial decisions, not because of a lack of intelligence. Again, goes back to the social Darwinists to think that the poor are unintelligent, but because the urgent need to make ends meet consumes their cognitive capacity. Similarly, busy professionals who are overwhelmed with deadlines struggle to strategize for their future because they are stuck in firefighting mode. So again, it affects everybody. When your schedule is packed, you sacrifice strategic thinking for daily survival. This cognitive overload leads to impulsive choices, missed opportunities, and ultimately cycles that reinforce scarcity. So, strategic thinking, you sacrifice strategic thinking for daily survival, because when you're just on a survival mode, you're not thinking, you're not having sort of higher thoughts, you're not thinking about anything, and all of your energy is being pushed into the parts of the brain that deal with survival, fight or flight. You're constantly in your ego mode, and that's probably why so many people are on edge, and why anything just tips them over, because they're constantly in fight or flight. And again, this can even be professionals, people who look like they've got money. Just because you've got money doesn't mean you've got any more time. Doesn't mean you've got less stress. Why would anybody think that? It's fear, fight or flight, and scarcity. And it just takes something like an empty supermarket shelf to put you into that state of anxiety. Can you remember that during the nonsense, during the 2020 PSYOP, when there was empty shelves and people were fighting? And what did it do to people? People become irrational and physical and violent and all the rest of it. And this is what it does. This is what it does to people. But life is like that. It might not be as extreme as if every supermarket shelf is empty, but life is generally like that. And what do people do when they do have some spare time? They're so exhausted they just want to watch crap on Netflix, or watch grown men playing children's games, or go to the pub and act like a chimpanzee, because when you're in fight or flight mode, that's the only part of the brain that's really working, is the chimp part which is buffoons around and is just wants to prank everybody and act like a child. I heard a story, I don't know if this is true, just heard a story a while ago, a couple of weeks ago, that during the 2020 PSYOP, this is in the UK, there was a shortage of toilet paper, and people thought, obviously, the panicked and everybody was buying loads of toilet paper. And people thought that, that made sense, because what's the one thing people think about when there's going to be a shortage? It's like those things that you absolutely cannot do without, and toilet paper is high on that list. But the story I heard was that it was done intentionally, and that all of the factories and stores with, warehouses with toilet roll were packed to the ceiling, and that they did that intentionally just to add more fear and more anxiety, because again, that is the sort of thing that everybody would have anxiety about, not having his toilet paper. It's how sick these people are. Tactics of mind control, scarcity, as we've touched on. Money controls your life choices or freedom, results in a desire for more. If money equals freedom, obviously we've explained, we've touched on morality equals freedom. But if you're mind controlled to think money equals freedom, then you just want more, and it results in a desire, in desire, and becoming obsessed with the material world, greedy, dog eat dog. Doomsday manipulates your emotions and plays on your virtues, results in acceptance of loss of freedom with the promise of safety. So the doomsday tactic is things like the climate change propaganda, is the one that comes to mind. Just stop oil, the world's going to end, and completely manipulates you, and to the point where you would accept even more slavery if what we've got is not enough. Health manipulates your natural survival instinct, results in you trusting authority to keep you safe. Again, if you put all of your trust in the health system, then you become a slave to those people, and you will trust them to keep you safe, and they can manipulate you into so many different things, as the 2021 PSYOP demonstrated with the Kool-Aid. Mind control at its best. And again, that's manipulating your natural survival instinct, because nobody wants to die. Media pushes fear, plays on your emotions, and controls what information you receive. What the media doesn't tell you is an intentional tactic of mind control. What the media doesn't tell you, lies by omission. This results in reinforcement of the system, persuasion and perception management, delivers lies in a nice tone, which results in pacification. People get news which, you should be, it should generate the emotion of anger, not apathy, anger, and it doesn't. Because if you tell lies, and if you deliver these bad news with a nice tone, everybody likes that bad news with a nice tone. I'm going to lie to you with a nice tone and a shirt and tie on, and that makes you trust me. Nobody, it's emotional mind control. People trust, they've been mind controlled already to trust authority, and they see these media talking heads as authority who deliver lies in a nice tone, just to make you apathetic. Scientism, the view that science has authority over all other interpretations of life, such as philosophical, religious, mythical, spiritual, or humanistic explanations. This results in a belief in the government-funded scientific institutions, creates an arrogant, atheistic, selfish mentality. I've covered some of that when we've touched on scientism. And obviously the scientific institutions, which are completely controlled by funding, which is completely controlled by government and vested interests. But yeah, that's science. Religion binds you, obviously, organized religion binds you to a set of rules from a higher authority, results in slave mentality and a fear of what happens in the afterlife, creates a pacifist attitude. Power of abundance. The opposite of scarcity is abundance, not necessarily in material wealth, but in mindset. When we perceive that we have enough, our decision making improves. When individuals are primed to feel a sense of control and sufficiency, they make more generous and future orientated decisions. They are more likely to invest in relationships, make thoughtful career moves, and set ambitious goals. That sounds like a positive mindset, especially future orientated decisions. Most people can't even see into, most people don't have the imagination and the ability to think about how their decision making and their actions will affect them tomorrow, let alone what path we're going on with the tyrannical government and how we are making things worse based on the decisions and the actions that we're taking today. Abundance thinking, and obviously the government don't want you in abundance thinking, do they? They don't want you to have plenty. They want you to be on the breadline. They want you to be uncomfortable. And even if you're comfortable in terms of your resources, are you really comfortable? How many salaries are you away from bankruptcy? You know, uh, just because you've got resources and just because you've got nice material things doesn't mean that you are not controlled by scarcity. Abundance thinking fosters long-term planning. People who feel financially stable are more likely to save and invest wisely. And that's what I mean. Just because you've got a good salary doesn't mean that you're financially stable. Do you have money? Do you have lots of money surplus to save and invest wisely? Because just because somebody drives an £80,000 car when they drop their child off at the local child trauma centre doesn't mean that they've got financial stability. It means that they'd just rather have that car than bring up their own child. Those who have time to breathe are more likely to develop creative solutions instead of reacting to the immediate pressures. Notice how having time to breathe, having time in your life and abundance, you're more likely to develop creative solutions. Which part of your brain is the creative side? The right side. The logic works perfectly with the ego. When you're in fight or flight, obviously you're still going to be using the logical part of your brain because that's the part of the brain that thinks, well, if I jump out of the way, that truck won't hit us. That's logic. Your motor skills, logic, left side of the brain, logic, ego. So you can still have intellect, but you have no creativity. The creativity comes when you've got time and you can engage with the creative part of your brain and make sound decisions, have an imagination, and be able to see the bigger picture. The Harvard Grant study, which tracked individuals over decades, found that economic stability reduced stress and enhanced overall well-being, while financial precarity negatively affected relationships and decision-making. Do you see relationships being negatively affected in this day and age? This scientifically evolved amazing times that we're living with all of this technology and everything, which is supposed to make the world better, and the governments are there to improve our lives. Do you see relationships and decision making deteriorating because of economic stress? and overall well-being. Just a coincidence. A pyramid of manipulation. Banking, business, military, politics, education, media, religion, intelligence agencies, medicine, drug companies, organized crime. Obviously, the Illuminati at the top there. Somebody's at the top. It doesn't matter what you call them. It's not your government. Levels of knowledge and hierarchy within the institutions, for example, from bank cashiers to chairman of the board. Obviously, the bank cashier doesn't know what's going on at board level. You know, the intelligence agencies, those agents at the bottom, they've got no idea what's going on at top level. And it's the same with all of these groups. What is happening at the top? If all of these institutions, nobody knows. But that's where the level of knowledge is. That's nobody in education at the bottom. Some immoral teacher who's never left school is probably bullied, and now is just the school bully. You know, that teacher at that school, he doesn't know anything about the top levels of the education system and what's going on, what decisions are being made, and why they're being made. It's on a need-to-know basis. Why would you think politics is any different? And obviously all of these other institutions. Freedom is a state of mind. Your mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. Don't let them manipulate you. Thoughts is freedom of information. Take in as much information as you can, not just from the mind control manipulators. Learn to think for yourself. Have free thought, because freedom is a state of mind. Nothing manifests in the physical world that didn't start with a thought. Nothing. Nobody can give an example of one thing in the physical world that didn't start with a thought. That's how reality is manifested. Everything starts in the mind. Your behaviors ultimately started in your mind. Any invention ultimately was an idea and a thought. Anything in our reality starts with a thought. Free your mind. It's like a parachute. It only works when it's open. Don't be ultra skeptical, and don't be ultra naive. You've got to just take it in with an open mind. Don't accept it or reject it straight away. Emotions, a sense of right and wrong that urges one to act morally. So once you've got your thoughts in order, use your emotions to sense what's right and wrong. Think it through. Be rational, and go with your intuition. What is my intuition telling us? Is this truly right? Your emotions are the bridge between your thoughts and your actions. And that's all a psychopath is. He doesn't have that bridge. It's thoughts and actions. Just do it. Like Nike with the Saturn symbology. Just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. That's a psychopathic, satanic mindset. Think about it. Is it good for you? Yes, do it. So your emotions give you the sense of right and wrong, and urges one to act morally, and then your actions must be righteous and not cause harm, which is murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, and deception. They're all of the harms. Anything that falls into those categories. Remember, coercion is a harm. We'll cover these in more detail in later episodes. ultimately, how we act, excuse me, how we act in the physical world will determine how much freedom we are rewarded with. If you act immorally, you're going to lose your freedom. I mean, even this philosophy is in the sick system that we live in. If you break the law, then you go to prison. So if you do bad things, you lose your freedom. That is exactly the same in natural law, in moral law. Call it what you want. As a society, if we act more immoral, then we will end up with our freedom removed. You can't control a moral society. The government cannot control people who can think for themselves and stand up when something's wrong because they know the difference between right and wrong. The government can't control that. It would, on a spectrum of freedom and slavery in terms of your rights, then the spectrum would go in favor of freedom if everybody had morals. Because you just wouldn't do it. I'm not doing that. That's immoral. It's not difficult to get your head around this. The more people do that, the more you're rewarded with freedom. And tyrannical governments would just collapse ultimately when people just refuse to do it. And it's all just through knowing the difference between right and wrong. You don't need a bloody revolution. It's that simple. It's ridiculous how simple it is. Utterly, utterly ridiculous. And if you look back and extrapolate from history, every single time there is slavery or a tyrannical government, you'll always find that the people were demoralized or the people became immoral, and you can only impose absolute tyranny on a people who are immoral, and that is the the evidence, the science, it's measurable, um, and it repeats. So it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Empower yourself to break free. Educate yourself. Knowledge is power. The more you understand the mechanisms of fear, the less susceptible you become. Understand the mechanisms of fear. Practice mindfulness, meditation. Meditation and mindfulness can help you regain control over your emotions. Take time to contemplate. Contemplation is a big one for me. Who are you? What is your purpose? Again, not many people even know who they are, let alone their purpose. Meditation and mindfulness, obviously, there's nothing, obviously, meditation is a good thing, but remember that don't escape into meditation. You still need to come back to the real world and face reality. Limit exposure, reduce your consumption of fear-driven media. That's basically turn off the television. Stop looking at that phone. Get your information from somewhere which isn't trying to petrify you. Challenge the narrative, question the motives behind fear-based messages, look for manipulation. The more that you do this, the more that you turn off the television and stop letting the media control you, control your mind, the more you'll see the manipulation. It's blatantly obvious. When you remove yourself, it's like you resensitize yourself to it. It's like if you stopped drinking alcohol for a year and then you had one sip, you'd think it was disgusting and it would only take you half a glass of beer to get drunk. The media is the same. Build a resilient mindset against fear-based manipulation. Learn to love yourself, self-respect. Don't be scared just because you're being told to be scared. Question it. Have some respect for yourself think about it, use critical thinking, focus on solutions rather than problems. This doesn't mean ignore the problem, but yeah, don't stay focused on the problems. You've got to look at the problem. You can't fix a problem if you haven't addressed it. But don't stay focused on the problem. Identify the problem, look at solutions. Surround yourself with positive influences, people who know the truth and act in accordance with morality. You'll find that people who know the truth about what's going on in the world and how we're manipulated and all of the mind control, you'll find that they are positive people. They are fun to be with, and they will have a positive influence on your life. They will, because people who know the truth, it goes hand in hand. They are kind people, and they have your best interests at heart, because they've got everybody's best interests at heart. I'm not sitting here doing this for any selfish reasons. I'm not getting anything from this. I'm not doing this because I want any recognition or followers or any gains. I'm doing this because I want to influence people and help them understand what's going on, what has been going on, but how we can change it in the future if we all accept what is true and act in accordance with morality. My point being is, I can be quite a pessimistic person, but I can also be fun and positive, honest. But these are difficult conversations to have and difficult topics to tackle. So you've got to have a bit of, you've got to have a bit of pessimism when you're dealing with this. But ultimately, all I want is the best for everybody. But they've got to recognize it in themselves, and they've got to recognize that there's a problem before anything can be done about it. But yeah, surround yourself with people who know the truth, because they'll have your best interests at heart. You still got to act with caution and use your critical thinking to determine whether or not you trust other people. But generally speaking, I've had nothing but positive experiences with people of this correct mindset. Develop critical thinking skills to separate fact from fiction. Learn the trivium of fact from fiction. You can't discern truth if you have a limited input of information. So the trivium is input, process, output. That's the most recent or the modern version. I think it is. What's the classical version? Well, it'll come to us. But anyway, it's basically input, process, output. So input, you don't restrict any input. If you're gonna come to a true conclusion, you don't just feed in half the information. You feed it all in. You then process it, and you use logic. And you use logic to see which bits are clearly don't correlate, which bits don't fit, which bits are ridiculous. And then you start to using a filter, I suppose, using a logic filter. You start to build a jigsaw, and you throw away all of the pieces which clearly don't fit. And once you've used that part of the processing, then output. That's when the computer would put it out onto the screen. It's got all of the information it needs, and then it shows you the program or the reality. And then the output that you would do is your actions. So input information, use logic and discernment, and then act and talk in correspondence with the correct conclusions that you come to about the truth. That's what critical thinking skills, and that's how you think critically, and obviously the Trivium is a tool to be able to do that. Not taught in schools, obviously. Right, time's getting on. I'll try and hurry up. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Yoda. And I do feel like we're suffering. There's a lot of suffering in the world. A lot of people don't know they're suffering, but truth is the path to the light. Love of the truth leads to right action. Right action leads to freedom. The Coop Files. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Never a truer word has been said. John 8:32. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. See you later.
My freedom. Murphy